Great, welcome everyone. We'll get started. Thank you so much for joining us for day 2 of the Postgraduate Research Festival today. So great to see so many of you here, and I'm so excited that we're joined for our keynote by Professor Ruth Gilligan today. Just to tell you about what else is going on today on day 2, so after Ruth's talk, you have a chance to explore some of our exhibitions. So they're on all floors of the Teaching and Learning building. On the lower ground floor, we have our Inquiring Minds exhibition and Research Almanac, research poster competition on the upper ground floor, and the PGT gallery displays of PGT work on the first floor as well. And that will be 1:30 till 2, and your final chance to vote in the People's Choice Awards. So make sure you pick out your favourite. There are QR codes around the exhibitions for you to place your vote and recognise postgraduate work. Following that, we've got 2 events. If you are someone who is interested in doing a PhD or in PGR study, if you're doing a master's at the moment or an undergrad or just generally interested, you can come along to our Progressing to PGR panel, a chance to ask current PGRs about what it's like to do a PhD and get the inside scoop. Or you're very welcome to join us for Research Perspectives, which is in here. Short talks by PGRs and early career researchers about their projects and about the ways in which they've collaborated with different organisations, different disciplines, and with their colleagues as well. We've got speakers from all disciplines, really exciting, people who have worked with charities, people who are composers and conductors, and people who have worked with the local council and combined authorities as well. So really interesting talks. And then do join us for the awards ceremony at 3 o'clock. A chance to hear all of our winners from the research poster competition and various other UGS awards, followed by a drinks reception. We all want to go to the drinks reception. I'm sure I don't have to persuade you too much. But that is day 2. Please join us for as much as you can. And that's it from me. I'm really thrilled to welcome Professor Ruth Gilligan for our Day 2 keynote.
Thank you so much, Lizzie. I'm not sending a last-minute text. I'm just going to put my timer on because I've been told I have 20 minutes and I could talk all afternoon, so I want to ensure you get to all those other lovely events and maybe to enjoy the sunshine. It's very nice to see you all. I'm Ruth Gilligan. I'm a professor of creative writing. And I've been at the university almost exactly 10 years. I think it's 10 years ago in August, I think I started here, which means 10 years ago, I was still a PhD student. So I did my PhD in creative writing down in the University of Exeter. I saw a job go live at the University of Birmingham. Even though I was still doing my PhD student, I thought I would chance my arm and apply. And 10 years later, here I am. So it feels like an auspicious moment to be talking to you guys and sharing a little bit about my work and my journey. Obviously, when Lizzie invited me to talk today, she made me aware that the theme of this year's PGR or PG conference was collaboration and connection. So I kind of thought about how I could speak to that in the context of my own work. And it was fun to reflect on, because I think obviously as a creative writer, people think our work, our research doesn't involve a lot of collaboration and connection. And to a certain extent that is true, but I think actually over the last 10 years, while I've been here at the University of Birmingham, I've discovered that isn't actually the case. And part of the things or the aspects of my job that I've enjoyed most and got most out of in the last decade are the moments where I have collaborated and connected. So that's kind of what I want to share with you here today. So to start off is to say, fundamentally, my research is that I am a novelist. I write books. I have published 5 novels to date, the most recent being The Butchers. So obviously, and all of you will know about this because you are writing dissertations or PhDs or long projects, a lot of it is quite a solitary thing. You are alone in the library, in your office, wherever you are, writing and thinking and researching. And that's a beautiful thing. And I want to be really upfront that I still love that aspect of my research, of my work, and creating worlds and writing 80,000 word novels is still sort of my favorite thing to do. But I also think there are ways in which even writing novels, even that kind of pure creative writing, is still quite collaborative. I work very, very closely with my editor. I've had the same editor for my last 2 books, so Ninefolds, Make a Paper Swan, and The Butchers. I had the same editor, and he's brilliant. And he's also brutal. So he's very honest with me when I send him a draft about what is working and what is not working. He sends me notes, he gets me to go away and rewrite the whole thing, to delete scenes, to add in a whole new character, that sort of thing. And I love it. A lot of people, sometimes I actually share my editorial notes with my students just so they can see that I go through the process too. And they're horrified by some of the things my editor says to me. But I find it so useful and almost to the point that I almost think it's like a bit of a ruse that we as writers are allowed to have a really smart person come in and read our work and then give us suggestions about how to make it better. That feels like cheating somehow. But it's great and it's so valuable. And in many ways, I think, and hopefully for those of you in the room who have a good experience with your supervisor, it's actually very similar to that relationship. Someone who is really invested in making your project the best it can be, who's coming at it as a fresh pair of eyes, to make suggestions, to point out moments where it's not working as well as it could do. So I really believe that is kind of a collaborative conversation and one I really savor. And the other way I do think that being a writer does involve collaboration and connection is when the book is out in the world, because then you get readers. And you encounter your readers in different ways. Sometimes it's going to book festivals and standing in front of a room of people like this and talking about your book and them asking questions. Sometimes, I get emails from readers kind of around the world. My novels have been translated into, I think, five languages now. So literally people all over the globe will write to me about a particular book, a particular character, a particular scene, and they will give me their interpretation of it. And again, that dialogue, that conversation feels like a really beautiful collaborative thing. So that moment when the book is out in the world, it is no longer just mine. It becomes kind of a communal thing, and I really love that. It's also worth saying that the kinds of books I write, so Ninefolds, Make a Paper Swan, it was on the previous slide, this is the paperback cover. So this was actually the novel that I wrote for my PhD. So as I mentioned, I did my PhD down in Exeter, and it was kind of a creative critical PhD. So I had to write a novel and then also a 20,000 word critical essay. And Ninefolds was quite a departure from the previous books that I'd written in that it was a very research-intensive novel. It's a book that's based around the history of the Jewish community in Ireland, which is a community I didn't really know anything about growing up in Ireland. But I kind of started to learn about their history and how they came to Ireland and different moments in time, and I just found it really interesting. So I ended up spending 3 years researching and then turning those findings into a novel. But obviously throughout all of this, I was very mindful of the fact that I was not Jewish, and I was writing about this community to which I didn't belong. So I was conscious of the ethical implications of that. Like, was it okay for me to be writing this novel? How could I navigate that? How could I honor these stories that weren't necessarily mine? So thinking a lot about that and looking to other examples, I started researching other Irish novelists who have written about minority groups to which they themselves don't belong. So a writer called Colin McCann, who I highly recommend to you all, he's written a lot of really wonderful novels, but he wrote a novel in 2006 called Zoli, which is about the Roma community in Eastern Europe. And again, so he talks a lot about the fact that writing this novel and the ethical considerations and how he didn't want to be appropriating and maybe weaving some of those concerns into the novel itself. I drew a lot of inspiration from him and his work, and that's what I ended up writing about in the essay portion of my PhD. So I think using stories to connect, to learn about other communities, other groups, was something that I was really kind of thinking about and mindful of. And I was reading a lot of work, as I said, by McCann. There's a cheesy, posy photo of him just for reference. And he talks a lot in this kind of space about the concept of empathy. And the fact that as writers, we need to be able to put ourselves into someone else's shoes, to imagine the world through their eyes, to do so in a respectful, honorable, true way. And then also about, as readers, we read novels and we develop empathy for the characters. We step into their shoes, we become the characters. So this concept of empathy and how it affects us as writers and readers was something that he writes about a lot, and something I was really, really taken with. And then McCann ended up thinking, well, this is what I do on the page, this is what I do when I'm writing novels, but is there a way that some of these ideas around storytelling, around connecting other communities, around empathy, is there some way that I could take this beyond the page, beyond just my published writing? So in 2014, he founded an organization called Narrative 4. So there he is in his dodgy little waistcoat, running a session. And Narrative 4 was founded by McCann with some other writers and activists. And the idea is to use storytelling to bring together people from different backgrounds to foster connection and empathy. So I think I've got their mission statement here. Building community through the power of storytelling, we envision a world where community and civic engagement replace loneliness and isolation, and where people meet each other with curiosity, not animosity. So the way that Narrative 4 seeks to achieve this quite grand but lovely mission statement is through something called the Story Exchange. So they run these sessions where what happens is they bring together two groups of people, usually from different backgrounds. Maybe it's kind of different schools or different areas in the same city, or even different countries or different faith backgrounds, whatever. So they bring together two groups, and everyone breaks up into pairs. And when you're with your partner, you tell your partner a story from your life, something that means something to you, something that somehow defines you. And then in return, they tell you a story from their life. And then everyone comes back together as a group, and you tell your partner's story back to the group in the first person. So you say, hi, my name is Mark, and when I was 15, this thing happened to me, this is how it felt, this is how it's affected me, etc. So you literally step into your partner's shoes and imagine, just for a moment, that you are them. Now this sounds really simple, but actually when you see it in action and the impact it can have on the people taking part, it's quite transformative. So these are just some examples that I wanted to share of story exchanges that Narrative 4 have done around the world. So this one that was on the cover of the New York Times magazine, it's between two schools in New York, so a school in the Bronx and a school on the Upper East Side. So as the crow flies, they're like a mile apart, but in terms of their kind of socioeconomic background, very, very different. So they brought two schools together to do a story exchange, to step into each other's shoes and to realize what life is like from those different perspectives. The one at the top, the Life Swappers one, that took place in Fargo, North Dakota, where there's a huge refugee population in the US, and there were some tensions emerging between the refugee population and the local community. So again, they ran a story exchange so that both groups could kind of see things from the other's perspective and start to understand a bit more about why these tensions were arising, and to develop more empathy towards one another. And then the New York Magazine one was a story exchange all around the theme of gun crime. So people from all sorts of different perspectives, cops, gang members, NRA members, people who had lost family members to gun crime, all in the same room, sharing stories around that theme. So yeah, it's amazing. It's now a fully global organization, as I said. It was founded in 2014, so it's just hit its kind of 10-year mark. Over 130,000 people have now done story exchanges from 35 different countries. And 94% said that they're now inspired to make a positive change in their community. So this is kind of empathy coming out into the world and connecting people. And the reason I've got a picture there from Belfast is that in 2014, when I started my job here at the University of Birmingham, I sent Narrative 4 an email. You can tell I was having a cheeky year. I was applying for jobs I probably shouldn't have applied to. I was sending emails to people I didn't even know. I was just, chancing my arm left, right, and center. Anyway, I emailed Narrative 4 and I said, look, I think the work you're doing sounds really interesting. I'd love to get involved. And at this point, they were only based a small office in America. And they said, as it happens, we are coming to Belfast in November to do a story exchange between a girls' Catholic school and a girls' Protestant school. Do you want to come? Do you want to come and see the story exchange in action and witness it firsthand? And as I've said to you, it's one thing describing the story exchange, this very simple exercise that just sounds really straightforward, to be in the room as it happened and to see the different ways that those girls interacted at the start of the day compared to the way they were interacting by the end of the day was remarkable. Like, I cannot convey to you how powerful it was. And I suddenly thought, oh my goodness, this stuff works. And I knew at that point that I really wanted to be involved in this organization. So in 2016, I got some funding to run a story exchange here on campus. So you'll see some photos you'll notice there down by Costa. So we worked with 3 different schools from across the Birmingham area, very different schools, very different kind of backgrounds and demographics coming together to do a story exchange. And at the end of that process, I said to them, what would you like to see happen next? If this project were to continue, what would you like to happen? And they all said, we would love to do a story exchange with teenagers from a different country. I was like, right, okay, that should be easy. Not, but anyway, we got there. In 2018, I got some more funding and I ended up taking a group of teenagers from Birmingham over to Limerick in Ireland to do kind of a whole weekend of cultural, creative writing events, but the main event of it all was the story exchange. And again, it was a moment, 2018, the Brexit legislation was just coming into place. There was a lot of stuff being said in the Irish media about the UK and vice versa. The border, the backstop was being discussed endlessly. So just to get those young people in the room to share their stories, to find that common ground, to empathize with one another was wonderful and a really beautiful thing to be part of. We were lucky enough that, again, on a roll with my cheeky emails, at some point I emailed The Guardian. Was like, this is going to be quite a cool thing. Do you want to come? And unbelievably, they said yes. So they sent a journalist who was there for the weekend and a photographer, and we ended up having a big spread in The Guardian weekend magazine with these young people and their stories. So you can find that online. I feel very fondly towards these teenagers. I mean, some of them actually ended up coming to study at UOB and stayed on to do masters as well. So they only just graduated last year. So I feel bereft now that I don't see them very often. But yeah, they were a very special group. And then another thing that happened was I didn't even think to do this. I talked about what I was doing with my colleagues. It's amazing how at this university so often we, even within the one department, don't even know what we're up to. So creative writing sits in the Department of Film and Creative Writing. And I remember having a coffee with my colleague Rob Stone, who's there on the right, who's a film professor. And he asked me what I was up to. And I told him about this project I was doing in Limerick. And he said, I see we've got someone coming to film this. And I said, what are you talking about? And he goes, Ruth, you're mad. This sounds brilliant. So he ended up actually brought one of his PhD students, and the two of them came to Limerick for the weekend, filmed the whole thing, and turned it into a documentary. The Vimeo link is there. We've ascertained the Vimeo link is not going to work in this room, but we're going to share it in the live stream and after the fact so you guys can watch. That's just a short trailer. The documentary itself is a feature-length documentary, but even the 2-minute trailer gives a really nice taste of kind of the magic of that weekend and the way, as I said, that those young people came together and connected was beautiful. And then we had a screening of the documentary in the Electric Cinema in town, and we got some of the Irish kids back over for that, and we reunited them all 1 year after the fact, which was kind of glorious. So yeah, I really encourage you to watch that if you get a moment. So just to kind of, I realize I'm near the end of my time, just some other connections. Now that I was on this role of just, getting in touch with organizations, I had a taste for collaboration, I suppose. In 2019, then I connected with the National Literacy Trust. And some of you may or may not be aware, but the university now has a partnership with the NLT called My Birmingham Story. So we work with the NLT to kind of connect with communities around the Birmingham area, to share a love of storytelling and to kind of try and improve literacy levels. So we've done some fun projects with them. We did a lot of work around the Commonwealth Games, and then also last summer around Windrush 75, again, using stories to bring together people from different backgrounds to share their experience and to try and connect a bit more across this super diverse city. So those have been really rewarding projects as well. And then just to mention another crowd called the Empathy Museum, who I literally found because I thought they sound like my kind of people because they've got the E word in their title. So again, I just sent them a random email. And since then I've been collaborating with them, running some projects, some story exchanges. I've done a couple down in Brixton in South London, and I did one earlier this year in Manchester as part of a big festival they had called The Fate of Britain, which is slightly ominous sounding, but it was not an ominous day, I'm pleased to report. So again, just constantly encountering different peoples from different walks of life and seeing the way they respond to the story exchange, seeing how much people not only love the idea of stepping into someone else's shoes and developing empathy from people from different backgrounds, but also how empowered they feel when you say, you have a story that is worth sharing. That moment where they realize, oh my goodness, maybe I do, and giving that story to their partner and seeing their partner take such care with it can be a really kind of life-changing thing for a lot of people. So watching people walk out of that room feeling both connected with one another, but also standing a bit taller and feeling, as I said, empowered and conscious that they have a story that's worth sharing is also part of the magic of it all. So just to conclude, a few things that I've learned. Oh no, go back. Oh no, go back. There we go. The first one is, I suppose, to kind of reiterate that despite the fact that the last 10 years has involved a lot of collaboration and connection, I still really like working alone. And that's okay. And I think, in any space, if people are kind of encouraging you to collaborate and work with others, that doesn't mean you have to give up that rare and beautiful pleasure of being alone in your office writing sentences, because nothing in truth brings me more joy. I still really believe in the power of stories to connect across differences. I feel that more strongly than ever. I think in the 10 years that I've been working here and doing this kind of work, the world has got more polarized. We've become more isolated. Obviously, the pandemic happened. So I think this work has actually taken on like another layer of urgency. And now the kind of connections that I do see fostering become all that more valuable. The joy of stepping outside of my comfort zone and working collaboratively, I would have said previously that I was a bit of a lone wolf, so actually to realize how much I've enjoyed working in these different spaces with these different communities, with these different organizations. It's not something maybe that comes naturally or that I had always envisaged would be part of my work as an academic, but to feel a bit uncomfortable, confused, disorientated, but then making something beautiful happen is a really rewarding thing. So I've really enjoyed that. And I think linked to that, the different kinds of impact you can have as a writer and academic. Like you can have all these plates spinning at the same time. You can have a week where on Monday you're doing a story exchange in a prison. On Tuesday you're at home writing your novel. On Wednesday you're teaching an undergraduate seminar on Thursday. So like every day is a little bit different, and thinking about the different kind of moments of collaboration and connection you can have is really exciting. This might seem really obvious, but collaboration has to be a two-way street. and co-creation is key. I think something that I learned early on, I think there was a risk at times. I was going into scenarios or approaching organizations being like, I have a really good idea for you, rather than being like, what do you need? What do you want to get out of this? How can we devise something that's going to benefit you? It's going to benefit me. We're all going to be enriched by this. And I think that kind of co-creation element is something that I've been doing more and more of late, rather than, as I said, just waltzing in being like, hi, I'm Professor Ruth and I've got an idea, because that is not that helpful. And finally, the unexpected connections are often the most powerful. This work has taken me to some pretty random places, and often the things that you think, that's not going to work, really does. So it's just about sort of just going with it and seeing where you end up. But as I said, it's been really rewarding and really satisfying along the way. So I think I've just hit 20 minutes on the nose. I am very, very happy to take questions. I believe for those on the live stream, Liam is going to be manning the chatty doodah. That's very technical of me. But yes, I hope that's been helpful. And please, any questions about any or all of that, I'd be delighted to answer. Oh, thanks.
Well, there is a question in the chatty doodah.
Great, the official title.
Give people time to think. Someone with very auspicious initials asks, or says, it's amazing so many of the projects have started with a cheeky email. Do you have any tips for setting up collaborations with new people or approaching organisations for the first time?
Great, so I think the practice is that I'm going to repeat the question so that it can be heard on the live stream. So the question was about my cheeky email approach and any tips about approaching organizations or partners for the first time. It's a great question. I mean, I think it's something that I have got better at, partly because this is all, the ones that I've just shared with you are obviously the cheeky emails that have led to something, that have been ultimately fruitful. What I haven't shown you is like the 120 other emails that I sent that tumbleweeded into the distance and never got replied to. So I think part of it is knowing that like, it's, I kind of hate that phrase, throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks, but there's a little bit of spaghetti throwing here in that you just have to know that not all your emails are going to be answered. So that's kind of, and not to take that personally, and that's okay. I think a bit like my final point that I was making about co-creation or making sure that partnerships are mutually enriching, I think increasingly it's not about having a really firm, polished idea or offer and contacting someone and being like, do you want me to do X? I think it's more about being like, hi, this is me, this is what I do, I have some ideas, I see that you do this, maybe we could put our heads together and come up with something together. And I think people respond a lot more to that, especially a lot of the work I've been describing is with schools. And I think the idea of just assuming that teachers have, you know, spare time or adequate support or wriggle room outside of curricula, unfortunately isn't the case. So I think meeting them on their own terms and really acknowledging that like this, for this to work, it needs to be a two-way thing. So I would say in those cold emails, those cheeky emails, acknowledging that from the get-go and being clear that you want to come up with something that you're all going to get something out of. What's been my favorite story exchange? That's a great question. I did one once online. That was between, we were very overambitious. This was actually quite early doors. We did a story exchange. It was online, and it was between kids in Ukraine, Indonesia, and Italy. And we'd asked them all to bring an object about which they could tell a story. So like maybe a family heirloom or something that was specific to their culture. Because sometimes people find it easier to come up with a story they want to share that way. It was absolute carnage. Oh my goodness. It was just like kids on the screen shoving, like, here's my lute, here's my mandolin, here's my teddy bear, and everyone was screaming. But it was just kind of beautiful. Like, it was complete carnage, and didn't flow the way a story exchange normally does. But it was really powerful because of that. The one I actually did in Manchester quite recently was great because I haven't really done this very often before, but because it was part of a festival, it was just an open call. And anyone, Josephine Blogs, could walk in off the street and take part. So we had no idea what we were getting. Like, usually we know the groups that we're going to be working with in advance, but this could have just been anyone. So I was really nervous. Like, bearing in mind I've been doing this stuff for almost 10 years, I was so nervous about, like, would anyone show up? And then would they get it? And then would we have enough? What if everyone was the same? Or, I mean, obviously that's a stupid thing because none of us are the same. But, you know, I was just a bit conscious of whether the dynamic would work. And I think part of that anxiety or that energy, it was really powerful. And I think, you know, we always give a prompt for what kind of stories people might share. And that one was specifically, I think, about kind of home or community or belonging. So there was a common theme to the stories, but it was kind of amazing that in the space of like 90 minutes, this group of total strangers who'd walked in off the street, like everyone was crying, everyone was like swapping email addresses, everyone was like, I feel more part of my community now. Like, it's just amazing. So I think that one, because my expectations were not low, but I just like didn't know what to expect, that was really powerful. So yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. So the question was, are there any tips for someone who wants to connect science with creative writing? Well, as someone in the room knows, there is quite a lot of work being done around environmental humanities at the moment. So like I have some colleagues who are doing some really interesting stuff around kind of eco-writing, and that can stem all the way to kind of scientists working on kind of green climate issues, all the way to my colleague who writes eco-poetry, and finding those connections there. Again, I think the cheeky email, I've been, cheeky is such an English word as well, which as an Irish person, I don't actually use it very often. But anyway, it's become my word of the day. That can work in terms of approaching external organizations. Also just like within an institution, like very occasionally, I will get an email from someone in the chemical engineering. That doesn't happen very often, I lie. But like, say chemical engineering, or who's, you know, someone who's working on, someone in geography, for example, and they sort of, again, they might not come to me with like a polished project, but they might say, I'm really interested. And I think the landscape of academia at the moment is that it's becoming more interdisciplinary. So we're being encouraged, because we're recognizing more the value of collaborating across disciplines. So again, just taking the initiative to reach out to people in other departments, in other colleges, to be like, hey, do you want to get a coffee and put our heads together? That's really exciting. And sometimes it does just start with that. I've done a couple of really interesting projects with colleagues in psychology. So they're in the School of Life and Environmental Sciences. And obviously they work on empathy, although they call it theory of mind. And their studies are a lot more sort of clinical and scientific. So I come bounding in being like, let's all tell stories. So very different approaches, arguably, to the same stuff. But again, some of those projects have initially started by just a cold email or meeting at a networking event, and being like, I think even though we come at things from very different backgrounds, there could be some really exciting chances for collaboration. So again, with all of this, I'm a big believer in just putting ideas out there, and sometimes people will reply and sometimes they won't, and that's okay. Any final questions? The clock is showing me we have 1 more minute. Clem.
You said initially that it maybe didn't come kind of naturally to you to do the collaborative work. What was the kind of process of like coming out your shell and starting that, and how did that feel when you started doing more collaborative work rather than solo projects?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you. The question was, I mentioned that it didn't come naturally to me at first working collaboratively and how I came out of my shell almost. I mean, I think I can be really open about that, and hopefully some people in the room will recognize this, but like I'm a little bit of a control freak. I think it's why I quite like writing novels, because like I am the overlord of this world. It's not a great trait, but anyway. But like it's all on me, like literally every word, and I can decide if a character dies or if a plot goes in a different direction. Like I am in control, and that's a lot of responsibility and pressure, but I also quite like that. So I think inevitably with any collaborative endeavor, letting go of that slightly and acknowledging that actually by delegating, by just seeing what happens when other people come along with ideas, by separating out who does what, you lose that control. But I think then acknowledging what you gain when you do that, you suddenly think, oh, okay, this is actually a really fruitful way to work as well. So it's probably the first couple of times it felt pretty unnatural, but the more I did it and the more you see things go in a direction you never would have thought of, or frankly, when you're working at scale, big projects happening that you never would have had the capacity or the knowledge to do on your own, you sort of realize, other people are good, which is a hilarious realization to come to as a writer who's been banging on about like the importance of connection and empathy and other stories. But I think in a particular working context, that took a little while. But I think the more I do it, the more I'm a firm believer of it. So yeah, thank you for your question. Right, well, it's now 41. So I'm going to let you go and look at posters and get some vitamin D. But I'll be around if anyone wants to grab me and ask anything else. Otherwise, thank you so much for being here. Enjoy the rest of the conference. And yeah, hope to see you again.